You finished Clone Wars, buddy?
Yeah,
You doing okay?
I don't know. I don't want to talk about it.
Do you want to talk about Empire Strikes Back?
Okay.
Welcome to Movie Reel, everyone. I am Samantha Tomlinson,
I'm Kevin Tracy.
and we're continuing Star Wars month with episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. So,
Woo!
yeah, which is everyone's favorite, it seems to be.
Yeah, this one's kind of just been credited as like the best of the best in terms of the Star Wars movies, and I feel like I have to agree with that.
Oh, yeah.
But Sam, do you want to add to what was so special about this particular episode?
So for today, I thought I would bring in my good friend who not only loves Empire Strikes Back, it's definitely her favorite one, but she's a diehard Princess Leia fan. Everyone, it is Haley Durant.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So what makes Empire Strikes Back like your favorite out of all the Star Wars movies?
Well, my favorite character of all time is definitely Han Solo, with a very close second as Princess Leia, and I feel like this is really their movie to shine. It's where we get to know each of them and their personalities a little more and their role in the Star Wars universe.
Agreed.
And it's just the most, iconic.
Yeah, no, I can 100% agree with that. That this is like a Han Solo and Princess Leia movie. Although there were a couple scenes with Princess Leia and Luke in this movie. One of them is a deleted scene, but the fact that that scene was even filmed kind of brings into question of if George Lucas even them had it planned that those two were siblings, and just kind of changed it at the last minute for Return of the Jedi, because there were two scenes in particular where it's like these two seem kind of into each other like way more than just
I mean to
friends.
ask about that because Mark Hamill posted something on Instagram and it was like pictures of Luke and Leia, and there was this one picture of them and it looked like they were about to kiss or something, and I'm like, I do not remember this, so I guess it was a deleted scene. And I've been wondering, like, when did they make that decision that they were siblings? Definitely not in the first one, because it teases it a little bit that there's going to be a love triangle
It
between
really
them.
wasn't fleshed out. Like, it's kind of hinted that there's, well, I mean, it's not even hinted. They straight up tell us near the end of this movie when I'm kind of jumping ahead in this movie, but when Luke leaves to rescue Han, Leia, and Chewie, and like the whole gang from Vader, Obi-Wan and Yoda is like, that boy is our last hope. It's like, no, there is another Skywalker. They hint that there's someone else besides Luke. They don't specifically say that it's like a sibling, or like it could be like his
Yeah.
father or something like that. They never specify what they mean by that. Um, the only time we ever really get any indication that he has a
Yeah.
sister, that Leia is specifically a sister, I think is in Return of the Jedi, when they just straight up is like, oh, by the way, you're my sister. It's like, I've always known this. It's like, all right, that makes Hoth a little creepier now.
But that's interesting though, because if Luke hadn't done what he did and
Yeah.
he kept going, then Darth Vader wouldn't have done what he did at the end of Return of the Jedi. I was been watching a lot of like Mark Hamill interviews prepping for this because I was looking for when he said he found out about Darth Vader being Luke's father and whatnot. And he was saying how, like, the first movie, he's like, nobody cared. Everybody, all my friends read the script, and we were all like, oh, this is ridiculous. This whole thing is so weird. And then for the second one, it was like under lockdown that no one was allowed to know
Yeah,
anything.
no, one of my favorite things on YouTube is just seeing videos of like kids or people who have never seen Star Wars see the iconic "I am your father" scene, and they just are like, "What, Dad? Is that true? Like, that's really his dad?" And their minds are completely blown by that scene, and it's such an iconic scene. I just love watching people's just genuine reactions, because that's the closest we'll really ever get to seeing like how like the general audience saw that back in 1980. when this first came out, of that huge revelation that like the bad guy was the bad guy.
I was gonna wait, but so Mark Hamill, he's I've seen him talk about this in a couple of interviews. He said that they were shooting, and at the original in the script it said like when Darth Vader reveals it was Obi-Wan killed your father, and he was like, what a twist, that's so crazy. And
Yeah.
then Irving Kershner came up to him, the director Irving Kershner came up to him and said, I know this, George Lucas knows this, and we're gonna tell you so you'll know it. And if it leaks, we know it was you that said something. And then he gave him a new page that said, "No, I am your father." And he's like, "What?" Like, and then he said though that while they were shooting, someone leaked that Obi-Wan was the bad guy. And he was like so excited because, oh, they leaked the wrong information. It's not going to get out now. And then I think during the premiere, he said Harrison Ford turned around and said to him, "Hey kid, you didn't fucking tell me that." Classic Harrison.
Because I heard a different story kind of along the same lines, is that they literally didn't tell him that Vader was his father until like right before they filmed that scene. So
Yeah.
his reaction is as genuine as he can get, because he literally didn't find this information out until like 2 minutes before they rolled action.
But also, I mean, but now that I think, so there was the actor that played Darth Vader, and then there was James Earl Jones.
Yeah, the actor who played Vader was I just saw it. It was David Prowse.
But I'm guessing James Earl Jones then probably didn't record until later.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So like, because I've been thinking, well, James Earl Jones, I guess, has to know, and it's like, oh, well, he probably didn't know till way later in the process when he was doing his voiceover.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Now that I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, let's jump back to the beginning of this movie. So yeah, this movie takes place. Oh god, it was like, I want to say like 4 years after the events of A New Hope. It's like it's a couple of years since episode 4, and yeah, the Rebel Alliance is kind of like, you get to see like their full strength. They're at full force, and the Empire's slowly trying to like figure out where they're at. And I just really like the visuals of like the Hoth base, because you get to see like how disorganized yet formidable like the rebellion is, especially when they get attacked. You get to see the rebels on the front lines and see how well they're able to fight the Empire. That was really something that we never really get to see in A New Hope, aside from the Death Star. Yeah, the Death Star battle. But even then, that was just like, all right, these are like the few ships and pilots that we have. But in this one, it's like, all right, we're giving everyone a gun, hop in the trenches. We're gonna do what we can to repel these guys. And I just really liked that, because it's like, oh, so this is what a Star War looks like.
Yeah, yeah, because you've been wondering prior to the movie. This answered all your questions.
Yes.
Yeah. So this movie, it came out June 20th, 1980. It was directed, like you said, by Irving Kershner and written by Lee Brackett and Lawrence Kasdan. And George Lucas is still credited for the story. And I think, as we already said, seems to be, I feel like universally this seems to be everyone's favorite.
Yeah.
I think out of the three, it's definitely the best one. But it seems like it's everyone's favorite. And it was on Rotten Tomatoes. It has a 94%, and audiences gave it a 97, which is, I mean, that's an insanely high, mind blowing score at any year, any time, in any movie.
Yeah, no, this movie is just like leaps and bounds in terms of scoring, in terms of like critics and audience alike. Like, critics absolutely loved this movie, especially back then, especially when you compare it to the first one that came out, because the first one, as we said last week, that one was a very almost by the numbers sword and sorcery type movie, just set in space. And this one takes it into a completely different direction while still sticking to the same story, which I absolutely love.
Don't you guys love it when critics and audiences love a movie?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to happen that often anymore, but yeah, it when it does, it's It's for a good cause.
So this one, when it was nominated for 3 Oscars, it won one Best Sound, and it also received a special achievement for visual effects. And I think John Williams, I think it was for this and for New Hope. I'm not sure about Return of the Jedi, but probably he won a Grammy for the music.
Oh yeah, I can believe that, because this is when we like. I mean, I think we hear it a couple times in A New Hope, but this is the one where we hear like right off the bat the Imperial March, like the Vader's theme when the Imperial fleet just arrives to Hoth, just the dun 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 dun, dun just that like
It's
foreboding.
just crazy to me that this is the first time we hear Imperial March. It makes sense because we
Yeah,
don't really
but
know Darth Vader that well yet. So it doesn't really make sense. It didn't call for it in the first one, but it's such a popular and well-known theme. It's just kind of a little mind-blowing that it's not even we don't hear it until the second one.
I wish I would have had the like experience of hearing that for the first time. I mean, at some point I had to have, but like I feel like I've been watching Star Wars since I was an infant, so I don't remember like actually hearing it, but it's so iconic. Like obviously you're not rooting for them, but something about that Imperial March, you're like it's badass. Like it is
yeah, yeah,
badass.
you're pumped. Like that's like, all right, I can. This is a war cry. I can get behind this. Who we fighting? um,
The
Yeah.
war
yeah,
cry.
yeah. It's like all right. It's like I'm ready to march in with this theme song. This is a
Right?
banger.
So we start this movie with rolling credits, as per usual. And so essentially, Darth Vader is completely obsessed with finding Luke Skywalker. And because of that, he's chasing the rebels across the galaxy. And so they're hiding out on Hoth, which was Norway.
Yes.
And, yeah. And an Imperial probe lands on the planet. And so Luke Skywalker, who's just finished his rounds, and he sees something land in the snow. And he lets his friend Han Solo know, hey, I'm going to go check this out before heading back inside. And he gets attacked by a
Wampa.
Wampa.
Yeah, he gets attacked by essentially an abominable snowman. It attacks him, and then it kills his tauntaun with his like steed, and drags him off to his cave.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's his steed.
It
Yeah,
is.
it's like a mounted. Um, it looks like a mix between like a kangaroo and a goat. I feel like that's the best way to kind of describe
Yeah,
what a
it's like an ice
tauntaun looks
camel.
like. Like it's
And it with like the face of the monster in Never Ending Story.
oh you mean
Not monster.
Falcor?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
the luck dragon. Yeah, God, I haven't seen that movie in a while. We should do that at some point.
That's what luck dragons are for.
But yeah, the Wampa like drags Luke off and kills his tauntaun, drags that off too. And Han and Chewie's like are just trying to repair the Millennium Falcon, just pretty much just saying it's like, hey, we need to get out of here. Like there's a huge bounty on my head, especially after we ran into that bounty hunter. Like Jabba really wants me right now.
So I was thinking, why doesn't he? I get why he doesn't say, "Hey, maybe I'll come back," because you don't want to give false hope. But like, I just kind of think, he could come back if it all goes really well and according to plan. If he pays it off, he could just be like, "Oh yeah, I'll be right back." Or is it because he has no idea if he'll find them again?
I think it's there's a couple things why he's not saying that he'll come back, because one, Jabba, like if he's gone this long without paying his debt, then he basically has a death sentence on him. And Jabba, like the Hutt cartels control at this point in time, they control like most of the Outer Rim territory. So like Tatooine, Ryloth, like various planets like that. Maybe not Ryloth, but a lot of like the more like scavenger type planets that aren't in like direct control of the Empire. Um, they just have like complete control over that and run a huge criminal syndicate. So he basically has like an army of like bounty hunters at his disposal. So if he wants someone dead, they're going to die, and he has a huge bounty on Han Solo that we later find out that the Empire kind of doubles, so they can definitely catch them. So yeah, I think he's not saying that he's going to come back because he doesn't know if he's going to come back, because Jabba isn't really a forgiving type of person.
So at this part, this is when Han is kind of saying bye to Leia, and she's kind of being very like, okay, cool, like, yeah, bye. And then he just wants her to admit that she cares about him, and she doesn't want to do it. She doesn't want to admit that he's gotten under her skin, and so then she kind of chases after him, and it's this whole thing I found super interesting because I've been thinking about this the last couple times I've been watching. So the writing style of Star Wars is very different because they so if this was any other movie, we would be seeing the progression between, like, their relationship had to develop between them blowing up the Death Star and Hoth, where we first meet them in the beginning of this movie. And I mean, there's been obviously enough time that's passed that as an audience, we're like, yeah, that makes sense. They're spending a lot of time together. But I just realized that was interesting because any other movie, we would see the full progression, not just like the progression of, because this is them being together is on the table.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
that's like,
absolutely.
you know what I mean? If this was any other movie, it wouldn't be on the table yet.
At this point in time, like they're bickering like a married couple, and it's especially funny
It's
because
very rom-com-y.
yeah, like they're literally like having like a borderline like shouting match in the middle of like this hallway, and like there are soldiers and like rebel personnel just like walking like right in between them, and just like they're just like, oh geez, mom and dad are fighting again.
Yeah, no one seems at all like looking over their shoulder. They're just like, yep, that's
My favorite
classic.
is the soldier that walks like right in between them. I'm like, okay, you really don't give a
He really doesn't. It's like you're tearing this family apart, mom and dad.
So yeah, but it's a nice little, like, a good starting point of their relationship, because like we said, there was some like light indication in the last one that there was going to be a love triangle, which I'm really glad they didn't do, because that would have been completely unnecessary
Yeah.
and stupid, and it doesn't wouldn't I mean, aside from Luke and Leia being siblings, it wouldn't have changed anything.
Yeah.
Later, when she says to Han, no, I like nice men. And really, I mean, it's just, no, I'm not supposed to like somebody like you. I'm supposed to like nice men. Like, Luke would probably be the ideal guy she would end up with, but
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. She likes bad boys, apparently. But yeah, as they are bickering, they realize that, like, hey, Luke hasn't checked in a while, and they're asking around to like the various deck sergeant, like the deck officers, like, hey, has Luke checked in? It's like, no, we haven't seen him in a while, and they're looking around, and Han finally decides that, all right, I'm gonna hop on a tauntaun, and I'm gonna look for my friend, and all the rebel soldiers are like, no, if you go out there, you're gonna freeze to death. Like, we're gonna be hit by a storm pretty soon. We're gonna have to close the doors, and if you're out there, then you two are gonna freeze to death. Then it's like, well, then I'll see you in hell. And that,
We talked about this last time, how
yeah,
he was so willing to abandon the rebellion and he just wanted the money. And to be fair, he didn't want to put in the effort of saving Leia. He didn't know her. But like, now he's risking his own life to go out and save his friend that he obviously cares a lot about, next to Chewie. Like, it's a nice character progression for
yeah,
him. And he takes the taunt. He also, it's a death sentence for his tauntaun. They're like, your tauntaun's gonna die. And he's like, okay.
yeah.
And then just goes. It's like, well.
Yeah, but it's him saying, like, when he's saying to like the rebel officer who's like basically telling him, like, you go out there, it's suicide, and Han responds, but well, then I'll see you in hell. That brings up an ethical question of, do they believe in hell? Is like Christianity a
That's a
religion?
line?
Yeah, he says, I'll see you in hell. And it's like, so wait, hell exists here? So does that mean Christianity's a thing here? Or is just hell just a universal term in that universe? Because
Well, don't bat.
yeah, because in terms of
In
like the religions in Star Wars, Christianity is never mentioned. There's Jedi, there's Sith, there's like the dark magic on like Dathomir, and I think the Ewoks have like a form of magic as well.
I'm pretty sure I heard the battle droids in Clone Wars say, "Oh my god," like at least a couple of times.
Yeah. Well,
Like it seems to be just kind of, yeah, it's never stated, but they kind of dance around it.
Yeah, like I know that in Clone Wars they do say like, "Oh, what the hell was that?" And this is in response to like a giant eel eating one of his brothers like right in front of him. It's like, "What the hell was that?" And it's like, and this is in like the first season of a kid show. This is a predominantly kid show, and they're saying, "What the hell is that?"
Oh
But yeah,
yeah.
it's never really brought up, and no one really seems to bat an eye. It's like, what's hell? They never really specify in terms of, is there like a religion that is like kind of like a unifying religion that everyone kind of like follows, because it seems like each planet and each species, each civilization has like their own widely different like cultural belief systems, democratic or just completely different like leadership. Like they have kings, they have monarchies, they have councils. No two planets seem to be ruled or controlled in the same way. So I just think it's funny that like
I
hell
mean, a
seems to
lot
be,
of these planets are treated kind of like states or countries almost.
for the most part, yeah.
You
I mean,
know?
they do have senators representing them in a unifying Senate, but it is kind of funny that,
Or they did.
well, yeah, they did. They don't anymore because the Empire disbanded that. It was just kind of funny that it's like, wait, this religious word, like this religious word with like very large religious implications, everyone seems to unanimously understand as an insult or something that should not be taken lightly. It's like, oh, I'll see you in hell. I always thought that was kind of funny, and it's kind of bothered me ever since. That it's like, wait,
I've never thought about this.
yeah, I've thought about this way too much apparently. Haley, your thoughts on hell in Star Wars?
Well,
The Organas are clearly a Jewish family.
the word, I get you on like the word itself, because it's like, or like even when they say it, Sam, as you were saying, oh my God. I definitely think the Star Wars has like an underlying spirituality theme, but that's its own, like for instance, the Force. So that's its own dialogue as opposed to like a real life dialogue of hell. So I see what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, no, it just I always thought it was just kind of funny that, like, I'm sure it was meant to just be like a simple like throwaway line of dialogue, just,
Yeah.
but the the weight to what he said has way more implications that I'm sure that any of the writers or the directors or even George Lucas even realized until after it was said.
Yeah, I think the OG trilogy has a lot of the writing problems. Like we were watching it in preparation of this, and I didn't even realize it. That's again, like I didn't even realize the hell thing until you brought it up. But I'm jumping ahead here. But later on, Lando, he doesn't say Han Solo, he says Han. And I don't know, I didn't even realize it, but Patrick, my boyfriend's all, Han? Did he really just say Han?
Yes! Yes! There was an entire, once they reach the Cloud City, it's like they just stop calling him Han and they all start calling him Han. It's like it's like
Yeah.
how in New Hope Leia starts speaking with an English accent for like one scene and then it just goes away forever. This is that. They all start calling him Han. Even Leia's calling him Han. And I'm like, Lando hasn't seen him in a while. I don't know. That's whatever. But like Leia,
Yeah.
you don't even know his
So I
name.
think that like they have like a few writing errors that
Yeah,
they probably didn't even think about.
yeah, there are a couple like continuity or like consistency errors in Star Wars, but for the most part, they're kind of swept under the rug, and they stick with it, so it holds up fairly well. It's just a couple like random slip ups, like the Han and Leia randomly speaking British for a conversation.
You think, yeah, but I think part of it all comes down to, especially because we do have the prequels, we do have the sequels, we have all these other extended,
We have the
and
the entire extended
you
universe.
at the time these were being made. I mean, maybe George Lucas was thinking about it a little bit, but he was more probably focused on these characters and what's happening right now as opposed to the grand scheme of things. Because yeah, if this was made today,
Yeah.
that wouldn't fly today. All like the internet would
No.
tear it down.
Well, I also think it was also part of the problem was these movies were made surprisingly like far apart from each other. Like these movies had like a 3 year gap. Like the first one came out in 77, this one came out in 80, and then the last one came out in 83. And then we had like a 13 year, or actually probably longer, until we got Phantom Menace, which was in 99. The time gap between movies, I feel like, was definitely a factor in the random small inconsistencies
Yeah,
of
exactly.
mispronouncing, yeah, mispronouncing names or locations or stuff like that. Because I even remember in an interview that Billy D. Williams had, he completely butchered 3PO's
What did he
name.
call him?
He called him like CPO or something like that. Like it's like, yeah, it's like me and Han and the robot CPO.
I'm Santha now. Just get rid of the middle part of my
Yeah.
name.
Yeah, it's just at the time I don't think the actors like fully realized how big this movie was, especially until I want to say Star Wars didn't get like super big until like a good like few months after um A New Hope came out, because that's when it hit big, and this one just kind of raised the stakes even further to the point where there's really nowhere to go but up. Like there's no way that they can tank this. Like they've raised the bar like cinematically and storytelling in a way that at the time I feel like hasn't really been seen.
Yeah. And so back to the movie.
Yeah.
So after that, oh my god, that one line started this whole that one
Yeah,
word.
yeah, no, that line has been like bugging me, and it's like I need to talk about this with someone. There's it's a throwaway line, but I know that it's like this has meaning now. Like this has meaning now. This needs to be explored.
so Han leaves to go find Luke. Luke is trapped in the Wampa's cave. He's hanging up. His like feet are like that's what I could. Are his feet strapped into something, or is he just are they just like frozen and the straps are on his boots?
No, it's I remember because I was curious about this too. Apparently, according to like some like encyclopedia of like the creatures of like Star Wars, Wampas are able to essentially like regurgitate a very like uh basically like nitro or liquid nitrogen. They basically just have like this like freeze breath like spit, and they're able to regurgitate that, and he was able to like stick him to the wall with that. It's basically like frozen vomit that he's able to just stick Luke up there and keep him trapped there while he munches on the tauntaun.
Oh,
Which,
that's
by
the
the way,
scene.
that is a very disturbing scene. You actually see him just like going to town eating this tauntaun. Like this thing is like covered in blood, and like chunks of flesh are like dripping out of its like fur on its
So
face.
I honestly, I was thinking. So there was like the spine of like some animal and all the bones, like whatever. And I was thinking like, oh, he could use it as a drum set if he wanted to.
What?
I don't know, like I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking like it be prepared or something. I think they use
Yeah,
bones
yes,
as a
I was about to say someone's seen Lion King way too many times.
so Luke's frozen. He can't get out. His lightsaber is on the ground next to him. He can't reach for it and uses the force. And the Wampa comes over and he cuts off his arm. And I found out he apparently completely hated and disagreed with cutting off the arm.
Yeah, he felt like that went against his
He
character.
viewed it as like so like a bear, an animal. Like it's not evil, it's just hungry or whatever. And he said he thought he was gonna just like singe with his lightsaber, singe its fur a little bit to scare it away. And he thought it was completely out of his character to cut off the arm. Which is a
Yeah,
very interesting point. I never really thought about that. I kind of just thought of it. I just thought it was like a, it's defense, it's escape. He's just trying to do what he can to get out. I didn't really think about. I mean, I don't know. It's gotta sit. I think I just found out.
yeah. No, I want to say that was like I want to say like last year or two ago for May the 4th, just randomly on like a Twitter post or like an Instagram post. Mark Hamill just like said that, yeah, I feel like is completely against my character. I do not agree with this. But I also kind of want to backtrack. The Wampa itself, I feel like, well, there are several creatures that we see throughout the Star Wars movies, and I feel like the Wampa is probably one of my favorites in terms of the original trilogy. It's so menacing, and we only see it for, I think, one scene in terms of like all the movies and TV shows. This is the only time we ever see it, and by God, they picked their timing well for this thing, because this thing's terrifying. Just the sound of it eating the Wampa, just like the wet, just like just
Hmm.
the growl. It's just, this thing is terrifying. This thing is nightmare fuel, and I absolutely love it.
So this scene, Luke escapes. He's running through the snow. And a fun fact: this was actually, they were shooting in Norway. There was a blizzard, and they just shot this scene of him running out of the cave outside, just outside of their hotel, which is crazy because then they're right there. Like their hotel's just right there. That'd be fun. Like they're all just like peering through and watching. And his head, he's like, "Well, what's the worst that can happen? I'm like 10 feet from where I'm staying." This is when he sees Obi-Wan, and there's the, is he being delirious or is it just the Force? Like Obi-Wan saying, "Go to the Dagobah system, and you're going to train to be a Jedi Master with Yoda." And this is when Han shows up. But I got to bring this up now. So, is it considered a fact, or is it just debate that they put in this whole scene, this whole sequence, to indicate his new face from his car accident?
That's what I've heard, but because before this movie, he had a car accident, and he had to get, I think, like,
Facial reconstruction.
yeah, a fair bit of that, from what I've heard. Um, and when he's attacked by the Wampa like slashes and like punches his face to knock him out. I feel like this is the rumor that I heard, that this was the reasoning why they did that, to make it look like the damage that was done by the car accident and the facial reconstruction was the result of him being attacked by the Wampa. Which I feel like that's a good save to explain why Mark Hamill looked so different between the two films.
But I mean, I feel
Um,
like the save really is the fact that it's not as much because he looks different, but he does kind of look the same. It's mainly his lips and his nose because he broke his nose and his cheek.
yeah,
I just keep thinking, I feel like the save really is the fact that he has to remember to use the Force to escape, and then he sees Obi-Wan. Because really, he needed just to be told, this was a reminder, I'm a Jedi, I want to be a Jedi, so I need to use the Force. But as well as there could have been another way that Obi-Wan, he hears from Obi-Wan, "Hey, go to the Dagobah system." Because but I'm trying to wonder what
yeah.
would that have even been? Like, what would.
Well, I feel like I feel like it's a good like indicator for him to show up in his time of need, because when Luke is like trying to like use the Force to get his lightsaber to escape the Wampa cave, he takes some time to like concentrate and like close his eyes and meditate in order to get that. And I feel like that scene was kind of like the catalyst to having Force Ghost Obi-Wan like, okay, he's progressing. He hasn't progressed nearly enough, and he needs proper training in order for events like this to not happen. So when he's stumbling out of the Wampa cave in the blizzard, it's like, all right, I need to tell him where to go. Otherwise, this is going to keep happening to him until he dies. And this guy's our last hope. We really need to get this guy trained up.
And I gotta say, this is probably. It seems like this is the only time they refer to it as the Dagobah system, or especially in the system, because they don't say we're gonna set course for the Alderaan system or Luke is from the Tatooine system. They only seem to refer to them as systems in this movie.
I mean, I feel like system and planet is kind of interchangeable in the Star Wars universe, but for the most part, they always refer to all the planets as systems. They don't really use planets that much
Yeah.
in terms of it's yeah, no, they're kind of interchangeable. But for the most part, they just stick with the term system when they're referring to the entire planet.
Okay. Okay. So Han, cuts open the tauntaun to keep him warm, and then the next day.
I thought they smelled bad on the outside.
Oh, and the tauntaun very dramatically, hilariously falls over and dies. And
Yeah.
then the rebels find him the next day, and then Luke is put into like a he's wearing his medical space diaper in like a thing of water.
Yeah. Yeah, they drop him in a tank of Bacta, which is basically like healing juice is the best way to put it. It's basically putting you in like a hibernative state to kind of like heal
I
you.
call that a
But
margarita.
like, oh my god. But yeah, no, Bacta is like a very like common first aid like stimulant, especially for first responders and military personnel. It's literally just like a vial of like a blue liquid that just gets injected to you into the neck. So like, oh man, he got shot. Quick, give him some Bacta, and they just
Oh,
inject that into you. They just inject that into you, and it's like, all right, it's basically like their space penicillin.
is that
It's
their
their
space
miracle drug.
penicillin? Is that what, like, because I'm seeing that a bunch in like Clone Wars, someone will be injured and then they just like inject them with something. They're like, you'll be healed in a
Oh
few
yeah,
minutes.
absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like nine times out of 10, whatever they're being injected with is either Bacta or it's some kind of tranquilizer.
Okay. Okay. And so they're in like Luke's in like a hospital bed, and Han is like, "Oh, the scar, looks cool and whatever." And he says to Leia like, "I guess you have to keep me around a little longer." And she's like, "I have nothing to do with it." And I'm thinking, what is he thinking? Was she like, "Hey Luke, I'm playing hard to get a little too well with Han. Do you think you can stay out on your rounds just a little bit longer and, keep him so he won't leave, keep him here for like an extra day?" Like
I think
I
Han's just being cheeky.
he is. Oh no, he
Yeah.
is. Like he for sure is.
No, he's fully implying that she hired the Wampa to jump
Yeah.
Luke.
What a conspiracy.
Yeah.
And what a reveal later. Like, yeah. So yeah, he's just
the Wampa was her brother-in-law or something.
she's in cahoots with the Wampa the whole time. That's the twist of the movie. And yeah, Han's just being cheeky, and he says to Luke like, she admitted her feelings to me, and Luke looks kind of bummed out by this. Like, again, not knowing their siblings, he looks kind of upset, a little bothered by this. And just to kind of get him to shut up, she goes and kisses Luke, and then Han's just like, feel better, and then just awkwardly leaves. He doesn't even know how to respond to that.
Yeah, and Luke is just like he like puts his hands behind his head. It's like haha, take that, Han. Like he's like super smug about it.
Yeah.
And then that kind of leads into later on a deleted scene. Luke's still in the hospital, and Leia like shows up, and they're flirting. Like there's like some like tension there, and it looks like they're like about to like kiss again. And then 3PO shows up and just like interrupts them before anything happens. But the fact that that scene was shot, like there's like a fair amount of like sexual tension in that scene. Between like her initially kissing him, which is in the movie, and then that scene, like they clearly like have feelings for each other that is not like a platonic like friend, like a friendly like relationship, which really like brings into question of like when did George Lucas just suddenly decide to like make them siblings, because it clearly wasn't planned up till this point
Yeah.
that they were siblings.
Yeah. That's funny, but like the for example, in The Office, I think this is true. There's a later season, I think it's the last one, where Jim and Pam are having problems, and there was a scene shot of him leaving a hotel room. I guess it was he like cheated on her. They obviously didn't use it because they're like, that's not in his character, and he pined after her for so long, and they had this whole thing of getting together. He wouldn't just be an asshole and cheat on her. So, I think I do think that, yeah, the fact that it was shot, like, the flirting was shot, that kind of indicates that at least, in the directors and the writers' heads, like, maybe some, there was no indication that they were siblings yet. But it's a very good thing that it was deleted, because that would have been extra weird and harder to explain later.
Yeah, seriously, it already is kind of weird to explain it, but I mean, but not by that much. But with if they included that scene, yeah, that's uncomfortable. Like, I don't want to have to explain that to like people who have just seen that. Like, why? Do, why are we watching Game of Thrones? Like, we do not want to
Space
watch.
Game of
I don't want to
Thrones.
watch incest again.
Maybe it had something to do with like the development of Luke becoming a Jedi, that they were like, oh, he can't have a
Ooh,
love
yeah.
interest because that won't go anywhere. So maybe like I don't know how far George Lucas was developing. Like I don't know. I actually am not familiar with if he wrote the first movie or all three of them together. I know it was like a few years apart.
Yeah, they were all made 3 years apart. Yeah, it's a weird kind of development that feels like it kind of came out of nowhere, but it fits very naturally in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I think the first movie, he wrote the first one. It was a success. It clearly worked. And then I think he was starting to think. I think he was maybe focusing more on Luke and the role of a Jedi and Darth Vader and that storyline a little bit more than anything else, because that seems very clear.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
very clear. I'm jumping ahead a little, but I realized, like, Yoda, for example, he's very well written. He's a really good, like, concise character to show us what a Jedi is.
Hmm.
Like, there's no conflict. He's just, I don't know how to explain. He's very clear. He's very light. Like, there's no
Yeah.
chaos, and that's a Jedi. Everything needs to be light and good as opposed to conflict and chaos.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love Yoda as a character, and when he's first introduced in this movie, he's like kind of comes across as like a crazy rambling hermit that is more of a nuisance than a help to Luke. It's like, Yoda, you seek Yoda. Like he's pretending to not be Yoda, so Luke kind of has to like to kind of test Luke's patience to see if he's even worthy of becoming a Jedi. And I just feel like that's a really good like introduction. And it's later revealed that he's just like super wise and ancient Jedi master who is like over 800 years old, I think, at this point.
Well, he says
Um,
he said, I think when he dies, he says he's 900, and then he said he trained a Jedi for 800 years, which makes a lot of sense because in Mandalorian, Baby Yoda is like 50 years, we found out.
yeah, his species ages extremely slowly, and that's one of the things that is really cool about Yoda is that it's never been explained what his species is. We only see like maybe like a handful of like members of his species. That like there was him, there's Baby Yoda, and then there was another member of Yoda's species on the Jedi Council, and I think her name was Yaddle or something like that.
Come on.
There's a lot of weird Star Wars names.
It's
Like there's
no,
one
it's
that's
just Yaddle.
literally
It's just,
named
it's like
like
a very, it seems kind of like a lazy version of Yoda, the name.
I mean it's literally female
Yeah.
Yoda. It's Yoda with like braided hair. um, and
Okay.
I think my favorite Star Wars name was I think is God. It's like Jarl Poof. It's like it's a Jedi Master. He was a member on the Jedi Council. He's the one in the prequels who has like the really long neck.
Do you mean like the one, the like eight, the Camino one, the people that create the clones?
Yeah, he kind of looks like a Kaminoan, but I mean he's not. But he looks very similar to them. Yeah,
Okay. I'm like, I don't remember. I can't think of this character.
he's a background character
Oh,
that was
okay.
literally just there to just like look how diverse our council is, even though
Yeah. Yeah.
even even though like three members of the council say
Come
anything,
on.
and
Even the
it's
Republic has
Yoda.
diversity.
Yeah, I swear every time they go to a council like member like meeting, like it's the same five people that talk, and it's Mace Windu, Yoda, Obi-Wan, and occasionally like a random fourth person talking.
So, yeah.
For a council, it's like literally run by like five people, and there's like 12 seats.
So, Leia kind of kisses Luke. And then we cut to this is our first hearing of Imperial March, and we're seeing the Imperial fleet, and they're pretty sure that the rebel base is on Hoth. And so uh, Darth Vader says, like, that's where they are, and I bet Luke Skywalker's with them. Is there, I can believe that he knows Luke's name, but how does he know his name? Is there anything in the
Um,
extended universe on
yeah,
that?
in the expanded universe, like after the battle of the Death Star, like Vader like senses like this guy is like really strong with the Force. Like I need to figure out who this guy is. So he hired Boba Fett to track down that pilot, and he like reports back to him like later on, before the events of this movie. He tracks him down, telling him like, his name's Luke Skywalker, and he lived on Tatooine for these amount of years, and basically tells him like he basically tells him the information that like Vader needs to know, that like, oh shit, this is my
See, I
son.
kept
I have
thinking, wouldn't
kids.
that be crazy if so first of all, he doesn't know Padme had twins, right? We didn't know that. I mean, we know that, but we didn't like know that until she was giving
Uh,
birth, right?
Yeah, no, he like finds out later on. And there's actually like I think this is still canon. Even before the events of this movie, Luke fights Vader. Like they have a lightsaber battle, and I think this is also before Vader knows truly who this person is. It's like, oh, it's a rogue Jedi. I'm gonna kill him. But like Luke escapes, even though he's like, huh, this guy's pretty skilled. This guy's really strong with the Force. I haven't felt like someone this strong with the Force in a long
But didn't
time.
he feel that
And this
during
guy,
when he blew up the Death Star? Seems that
yeah,
seems kind of
yeah,
redundant, that fight.
yeah. That's why it's a random comic
Oh,
that no
oh,
one's read.
oh!
That's
You said it because you were talking about the other thing because you said I think it's still canon. So that's why I'm like,
it's still. I think it's still canon. They have like various like comic spin-off series that are still attached to like the overall canon of Star Wars. And I think that first like contact, like lightsaber fight between Luke and Vader, takes place before Vader hired Boba Fett to track this guy down to figure out who he is. He knows that this person, based off of like just general sensing them, that this guy is the one who blew up the Death Star, because there's no one else that
could have done
could
it.
be this connected to the Force. Yeah.
But I kept thinking at this part, like, wouldn't that have been so interesting if so we don't know that Darth Vader is Anakin Skywalker yet. But on
No.
his end, wouldn't that have been interesting if if like we see like in this scene someone's if we see a scene of him realizing the person that blew up the Death Star is Luke Skywalker and him realizing, oh my god, it's my son. Obviously, facial expressions are out, but like and maybe the performance wouldn't be that much different, but it would still be like him realizing this is my son. Like this is my flesh and blood. Like he
Well, I feel like they kind of had a scene like that, because later on in the movie, when
the Emperor.
Vader, yeah, when Vader's tracking down the Millennium Falcon, he has a hologram like message from the Emperor, and they have a conversation, and they talk about like, yeah, this is Luke Skywalker. We need to make sure that he doesn't become a Jedi. He needs to either join us or die, because he's the son of Anakin Skywalker.
I've been thinking about that though, because that scene, and he says that, and I'm like, because yeah, we're jumping ahead, but like at that scene, I'm like, don't we know this already? Darth Vader knows this already. So is it just that maybe the Emperor just found out and then is telling Vader, but we already know it was just like the same information twice.
I feel like it's mainly there for the audience to just kind of
Like, is it just
like
the Emperor's catching up? He now knows,
yeah,
and Darth Vader
yeah.
didn't tell
I
him.
feel like I feel like it's more of just like a recap for the audience, because it's been 3 years since they've last heard this kind of critical information.
And do we hear the name? Is do we know? Do we hear the name Anakin Skywalker in A New Hope? I don't remember.
I don't remember. We might have, and I'm totally blanking. I don't think we do. I think I remember like we hear is that his father was a Jedi.
Yeah,
That was pretty much it. I don't think the name Anakin ever really comes up or is said. I could be completely wrong.
I really love the name choice. I do love the name Anakin, but I gotta say, like, can you imagine like them debating this, like, Stephen or Joshua? Like, the back and forth. Who knows? So yeah, they figure out the rebels are on Hoth, and everyone's basically about to. They're kind of beginning evacuation. So Han found the probe. They realize that the Empire knows that they're there, and they're essentially just they're trying to evacuate. And Luke is getting into a suit. He's gonna fly, and he and Han have this kind of like they're not mushy, but I love how he goes to say bye to Chewie, and Chewie just grabs him and hugs him. And I'm like, why would your first of all look at him? Why would your first indication not to be to hug him? He's like a giant bear.
I would love to hug Chewbacca.
If I ever get to go to Galaxy's Edge, that's like if I see Chewie, I'm just gonna run at him. Like
That's basically what my mom did.
wait,
she she absolutely loves Chewbacca. And Mom, if you're listening to this, Happy Mother's Day. Because that's when I know it's going to be a few days late. We're literally filming on Mother's Day, but Happy Mother's Day, Mom, and everyone else who's
every other
listening.
mom. Yeah.
Yeah, every other mother.
Uh,
um,
yeah.
yeah, it's at this point. We kind of see some of my favorite moments of Vader when the Empire like shows up. One of the commanders shows up a bit out of formation, and it completely alerts the entire Rebel base that they're there. And Vader like chokes him out and kills him to like as a reprimand because he did this. One of the officers who's there gets basically a battlefield promotion because of that, because the superior just died.
Is that why you get
Um,
promotions in the Empire? Just somebody has to die? Or it's not because of
well,
your good work?
no, like they still have like normal like military progression, but if you work with Vader, like chances are you're going to get a battlefield promotion in some way or another. Because Vader does not tolerate failure in any way, shape, or form. He has led like multiple campaigns where he has like more or less sacrificed his own troops for the sake of completing the mission, like complete and utter like annihilation of his troops. And he will lead his troops too. So he's literally running into a meat grinder, knowing that he'll survive and his troops won't. But the soldier that like gets the battlefield promotion is Captain Need It, and he's seen throughout the rest of this movie and Return of the Jedi. And the amount of like battlefield promotions, I think I counted it at one point. I think he gets like 3 or 4 battlefield promotions to the point where he becomes an admiral by the end of Return of the Jedi, and he started off as a captain in this one.
Jeez, what is he, Jar Jar? Just like constantly getting
Yeah,
promotion.
basically,
Oh, that's
yeah,
unfortunate.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean, at least Need It is like he's a fairly competent imperial officer. Um, like we never really see him like in the field doing anything necessarily noteworthy, but I mean he follows orders like to the letter from either the Emperor or Vader. He doesn't really seem to be taking any orders from anyone else.
anyway, so yeah, everyone's evacuating, and basically Han goes to Leia. I love this part because they're trying to evacuate. The Empire is like attacking, and Leia is still just in the control room working, and Han's like having to force her to get out. Like she's just still.
Yeah.
And I gotta say this. So Haley, you and I have talked about this. So I said this last time though too. This is my favorite of Leia's outfits, but but it's so practical. That's really why I love it. It's stylish, but it's super practical.
Not only is she shielded from the cold, but she's ready to fight too.
Her battle parka.
And yeah, like I mean, I just love her hair and her like cute vest. She's just super like, I have this obsession with practical clothing for women in movies because they're always given like they're given like stiletto boots or they're given something that's like you can't be comfortable in that.
They're kind of giving like a more of a femme fatale kind of look.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can understand. Yeah, no, I admit like Leia's battle parka does look pretty good. Like I have no way else to describe what she's wearing. It's like, yeah, that's a battle parka.
So anyway, yeah, so Luke and is with the pilots, and a lot of people are on the ground, and here come the ATSTs, aka the robot camels, which I know.
ATATs. ATSTs are the
Wait,
chicken walkers, the 2-legged ones.
oh, Okay.
Come on, know your Star Wars, Sam.
God,
Oh,
sorry.
this is embarrassing.
AT-ATs. I saw something that said something about AT-ATs, and I thought they just wrote ATSTs wrong. I'm like, oh, stupid!
Yeah,
You put the wrong letter.
yeah. No,
I feel like the stupid one.
there are a couple ATSTs in the Battle of Hoth, but it's mostly I think 3 or 4 ATATs, which are basically stands for all terrain armored transport.
But I'm thinking of like the Empire. I'm like were they trying to design it like a weird slow animal, or were they trying to make it look like let's create a robot after the menacing camel?
Yeah, the camel,
Uh,
nature's silent
yeah,
killer.
nature's killer. so so Luke is flying, is piloting, and Dak is shooting.
Yeah, I think his name's Dax.
Dax? Oh, I thought he said Dak. I don't know. Anyway, it starts with a
Yeah,
D,
yeah.
and there's an A in there.
Dak or Dak. Yeah, yeah. They're flying a snow speeder, which has a rear gunner harpoon, which needs to be operated by a second pilot. And they have the genius idea of hog tying the AT-ATs to knock them down so that they can pin them down and take them down because their armor is too thick for their any conventional weapons that they have on hand.
And I love that Han and Leia are trying to get to the Millennium Falcon, and C-3PO is just like running after them. He can't run. He's like waddling because he can't bend his knees.
Yeah, which
And
seems like a
I just
massive design flaw for protocol droids.
and on well, because they're not really meant to be running, right?
I know, but I mean, they're meant to be like servant droids, but if they need to like bend over or pick something up, they physically
Okay,
can't do that. That seems like a
but
massive
on
design flaw for the one job that they were meant to have.
for Anthony Daniels though, it looks super. I feel like the costume had to be fun to wear, but it also had to be super uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like
Um,
it's just metal, and he can't bend or like
yeah, he has very like rigid joints because of that.
really.
No, it just looks like he literally can only make like very limited gestures or movements with his arms or legs and even his head.
Oh, in the costume, you mean?
Yeah, yeah, in
I
his
thought you meant
I'm
in
not. I'm
life. I'm like,
no, no,
wow.
no, no, no,
Like,
no. I'm it in Anthony Daniels in the 3PO costume is just like very limited movement. I would imagine that'd be very uncomfortable. But during the scene it leads to another deleted scene that I thought was kind of funny and I felt like should have been like fun to leave in because it adds a bit of a weird kind of character dynamic to 3PO. Basically the scene is that they basically like trap some wampas in a like late earlier on like some rebels managed to trap a set of like wampas in like some like supply closet that they some wampas like dug a tunnel through, so they're just trapped in like this utility closet, and they have a sign up there that basically says like don't enter, like it's dangerous, don't go in there. And 3PO, as they're being chased by like snow troopers, removes the sign to make it look like because the stormtroopers were checking every room for survivors, and as the stormtroopers come across that door, a pair of like wampa arms grabs the stormtrooper and just drags him in, and the stormtrooper just closes the door, and the two remaining stormtroopers just like look at each other and just like, oh shit, and then just like walk away.
so,
They
yeah.
just watch their friend get mauled to death. It's like, uh,
Uh,
well, call
Tim.
dibs on his stuff.
Yeah. So, yeah, so Luke sees I don't know, I love the scene. I don't know why, but I just love when he sees the Falcon flying out, and then the plan is to meet at the rendezvous point. But no, he is going to go to the Dagobah system. And
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And
yeah, boy.
Han and Leia are fleeing from the Empire, and they go into an asteroid field, which it seems like C-3PO gives a lot of bad news in the first like act of the movie. Like the chances of surviving like overnight outside in Hoth are 725 to 1, or the chances of going through an asteroid field are like I don't know, it was also 2-1. It was also really bad.
Yeah, like Han, Chewie, like Leia, like that whole like gang, they can't catch a break. They're constantly being tailed by the Empire from the very beginning of this movie all the way to the end, and it's like these guys cannot catch a break for the life of them.
Well, then they catch a break, and then they find out that they're in a monster's mouth.
Yeah, huh, been there.
Portrayed by Meg in the Family Guy Star Wars parodies.
Which is, I feel like, is like 90% of your knowledge of this movie comes from that parody.
I mean, a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of
I
it does.
like way more than should be.
So they arrive in the Dago. So I was. Is there any explanation in the universe that why Yoda picked the Dagobah system?
um,
Because it seems to
yeah,
be there's an area that's specifically, oh yeah, there's a lot of the
there.
dark force over there, and also it's filled with snakes. They're just everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a swampy marshland is the entire
Yeah.
planet. Yeah. No. The reason why Yoda picks the Dagobah to basically be like his like refuge, where he spends like the rest of like his like basically his like years of exile alone. The reason why he picks that is because Dagobah is like unusually strong with the Force. There are several planets in the Star Wars universe that are really strong with the Force. Dagobah is one of them. Korriban is another one. Um, Dathomir is another one. But those last two are really strong with the dark side of the Force. And Dagobah is a lot more neutral. It can kind of show both sides depending on who's looking. And since Yoda is like so in tune with the light side of the Force, it's a really good hiding place for him, because if someone's very like adept with tracking someone who's uses the Force and they go there,
Oh,
you can't track anyone there because the entire planet is full of the Force.
smart. Okay, I assume it was some reason like that, and
Yeah.
so
Well,
they
and
crash.
then
Yeah.
yeah, there are other reasons why he chose Dagobah, but I mean that kind of goes into more spoiler territory for Star Wars: The Clone Wars. So if you haven't seen that, definitely give that a watch.
So they crash land, and R2 falls in the water, and when he gets him out later, he's just covered in mud, and I'm like, God, if I had a paper towel and like some like Windex, I just wanted to clean him so badly. Like, I, well, once he later it started raining, and I'm like, okay, good.
Yeah, no,
Later, yeah.
I felt so bad for R2. He just gets dragged under by like this like sea eel and then just gets launched out of there. It's like, no, R2, my precious baby boy, leave him alone.
So he unpacks and he feels like he's being watched, and there's some like weird puppet that's watching him, and he is just like searching through all of his stuff, and he tries to take some of his food, and I just love how R2 interjects and tries to grab onto it, and like it's like a game of tug war. And yeah, they're hanging out in the design for Yoda's house is like it's kind of it's interesting because it's like a it's is it within a tree or something?
Yeah, it's like built like around a tree for the most part. It's just kind of like this like isolated kind of like alcove that he just kind of like built around of.
And yeah, he's basically yeah, it's like you said, he's just testing to see what is Luke's patience when he basically has none, and then he reveals to be Yoda, and we hear him talking with Obi-Wan saying like, I can't teach him, he has no patience, and he's also way too old to begin training, and ultimately agrees like, okay, yeah, I'll train you. And so later when we're seeing him like in the midst of training, what level do you think he's at? Because I'm assuming in the beginning he in the first film he has kind of the he's at the same level as maybe like a youngling.
But yeah, in the beginning of the movie, he is like definitely kind of like Padawan level, but I mean, after training with Yoda for a while, he is kind of like moved up to like just kind of below Jedi Knight. He's still technically a Padawan at this point. He doesn't really hit Jedi Knight until Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
I mean, like Yoda, like straight up says, like your training is done. There's not much I can teach you. But that still doesn't make him a master, even though he doesn't have a teacher anymore. So yeah, he would probably be like I guess like a low-level knight or a high-level apprentice by the time he leaves Dagobah.
Because he's just what he thinks he was doing. I'm just like, I mean, again, he's hadn't. This is his fight with Darth Vader is his first real attempt, like with his lightsaber, worst field fight with his lightsaber, and he just because I was like debating, I was wondering, I'm like, what level do you think he'd be at? Because it's kind of like he is, I guess, had to be Padawan level, but honestly, it seems kind of like he skipped that because he didn't have the normal training that a Jedi would have had. But
well, I mean, in canon, like this would have been like the second time they have fought each other face to face because of the comic I had mentioned earlier, and Luke just got his ass kicked during that fight. He stood zero chance, and it just kind of got to a point where like Vader was just kind of toying with him to just kind of gauge whether or not he was a challenge because that was a thing that Vader did. He on a couple occasions he pitted Jedis against each other, had them fight each other to the death, and that he would fight the winner and just destroy them because he wanted a challenge. He wanted someone to push him to like the next stage of where he would kind of be pushed to his limit. And after killing Jedi for 20 years by this point, he has found no challenge.
That seems like so much work just to fill that need.
Yeah, no, Vader was very sadistic.
Han and everyone, the Millennium Falcon's hiding out on an asteroid in some kind of cave, and they're putting back together the ship.
The Millennium Falcon is just
the ship is
the hyperdrive isn't working, which is why they're having such a hard time escaping from the Empire.
And C-3PO, he's like what, plugged into the ship and basically saying it says that we need to replace this and do this. And I love how Han's just like, yeah, I know. And then he says, Chewie,
it's like check the hyperdrive for leaks.
And I didn't say this before. When they're leaving, when they're escaping from Hoth, and they're on the ship and they're struggling to start it up, and Leia's like, "What do you want me to get out and push?" And he's like, "Do you think it'll help?" And he's like, "Yeah, might." It's like they're like little kids sometimes with their bickering. And I appreciate that Leia is helping out. Like she's also working, because I feel like if it was me, I'd be like, I want to help, I just don't know how to help. I don't know what to do. Yeah. But she seems to know her way around.
I mean, when the Minox are attacking their ship, and he's like, "I'm gonna go check it out," and she's like, "Okay, I'll go with you." I was like, wow, I don't know if I would. So she is badass.
She definitely like isn't like your stereotypical princess. She's not a damsel in distress. Like she's a badass. She goes out of her way to shoot stormtroopers, kicks ass and takes names throughout this entire franchise.
It's a good way of putting it.
This is when Han and Leia kiss, and the build up to it's adorable and hilarious because he's still just kind of being Han and being like a little cheeky, and finally it's kind of weird though. He like grabs her head. She says that he's a scoundrel, and he's just like, I like that name. Like very like, oh, okay. Like that's because he keeps calling her your worship.
Your worshipfulness. Oh, and this is after on Hoth she calls him a scruffy looking nerf herder.
Is nerf herder like a bad insult?
I've never really heard it until this point in the like this is really the only time, but like based on the context, I would imagine that is an insult of like a very like severe like derogatory insult.
And okay, that's what I thought. I wasn't really sure, but anyway.
I have no idea.
But they kiss, and then C-3PO interrupts them. Like, I got this thing to work, and Han's just like, cool, thanks, and it makes things awkward, obviously. I think this is when, and then next, this is when we have Darth Vader talks with the Emperor, and like I said before, it's just a recap.
It's just pretty much just like talking about how we need to convince Luke to join us. He is strong with the Force, and he is the son of Anakin Skywalker. And I think that's mainly there to just recap the audience that it's like, oh, so this is who his father is, and how Vader reacts to that is like, is this possible? Is it truly the son of Anakin Skywalker? And it's like, search your feelings. You know it to be true, and
Yeah,
then this is later like reflected in the "I am your father" of
yeah.
like, search your feelings. You know it to be true.
That's what I was gonna say. I didn't think about that because that right there is it's like that's like just the Emperor speaking through him. And there is this really great I know I've texted both of you guys saying to watch the docu-series on the Mandalorian because
Yeah,
the first episode is literally just I won't spoil anything, but the first episode is really just the directors each talking about the episode they directed, and it's
yeah, and so far that's the only episode I've seen, unfortunately.
so there's only 2 episodes right now. Third should be coming out this week. But Dave Filoni, who you know, who worked for the Clone Wars, he does this
Yeah,
really.
absolutely love that guy.
He first of all, he talks about how he almost lost that job because he thought it was a prank call. He didn't believe that they were
Yeah,
actually offering him a job or offering him an interview.
I absolutely love Dave Filoni.
But then
that story was hilarious.
But then I won't give anything away. But he does this dissection about Anakin and Luke, and I will say what I like is that they look at Star Wars as a whole. They look at the prequels and the original as opposed to just one or the other. And I won't spoil it, but he basically talks about this one scene that happens early on, and how this scene I never really viewed it the way he did, and I realize now my jaw dropped. Honestly, I was like, oh my god, because it really ties in the whole arc of Anakin, Darth Vader, and Luke up
Yeah,
until the
no,
end.
Dave Filoni, he was pretty much like the creative lead for Star Wars: The Clone Wars, which ties together like the prequel trilogy.
Yeah,
Um, and he does it in a way that he is so knowledgeable of like the overall lore and expanding universe of Star Wars that he created his own contributions to the Star Wars canon, which are now official canon. Like he's added whole new factions, weapons, planets, characters that are beloved by the fandom now. He's brought back fan favorites. He's even brought stuff from the Old Republic, an era that has been completely erased by Disney and is no longer a part of canon anymore. And he's brought back a bunch of stuff from that. And the inclusions that he's added to Star Wars have made it a lot more entertaining to follow along with it. And he's just added so much to it that he's almost kind of like become like the apprentice to
George Lucas.
George Lucas because the amount of like one-on-one time that they've had together, because he needs approval from Lucas, and I think he needs approval from like Disney and Kathleen Kennedy to approve specific things. But for a while he had to get direct approval from George Lucas and LucasArts to add all these things, and it's just such a fun dynamic that they have, that I feel like Star Wars is in good
Oh
hands when
yeah,
Dave Filoni is attached to it, because the work that he has done from like Clone Wars to like the stuff that he's helped on in Rebels and now Mandalorian, like those are all really good. I mean, yeah, he knows what he's doing, and he is like one of the few people that I am comfortable with leaving Star Wars with.
so Luke is training with Yoda, and there's a scene. Basically, Yoda explains to him. He's asking about the dark side, and Yoda explains to him like it's not more powerful, but it's easier to use. It's quicker, it's more seductive, and I was always thinking. So Kevin, you had once said that there are dark Jedi. There's Jedi's that
Yeah,
are Jedi, but they do bad things. Are there any good? Can't there be
Mm-hmm.
good Sith? Because if it's so much easier to use the dark side, why not just use the dark side but do it for good?
I mean, there are a few examples of Sith who kind of act in a selfish way, but also are kind of conduct themselves like a kind of like a chaotic good.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like would be a good way of putting it. One clear example, and I mean this is kind of going straight into spoiler talk for Clone Wars for you, Sam,
No,
since
wait.
you're not into this, so I'm not going to get into that now.
Good.
But there are a few instances where chaotic good Sith, like that's not really a thing that is necessarily common. Dark Jedi, I feel like, are definitely more common, and it's pretty much just like Jedi who are kind of slowly converting into like a full blown Sith. Because Sith, you can only really be a Sith if you are the master or the apprentice of that master. Everyone else is kind of considered a Dark Jedi. And during the time of the Empire, the master and the apprentice combination was the Emperor and Vader, because for the Sith, there's the rule of two, and the rule of two is there can only be a master and apprentice at any given point. If there are more than this, then there will be chaos, and both parties would be fighting for control, and that ultimately led to the destruction of the Sith Empire during the Old Republic. So Dark Jedi, or during the Empire, they kind of employed Jedi who betrayed the Order in order to stay alive, and used them as Jedi hunters, and kind of employed them as like Sith assassins called Inquisitors.
Ooh.
And they're really menacing. They're all given red lightsabers, and a lot of them are given double-sided lightsabers like Darth Maul, but that are given like this like a gyroscope inside of it that allows it to spin, where they can hold the handle completely straight and just kind of have like a helicopter propeller kind of effect to it. So yeah, that's really menacing. But yeah, Dark Jedi are fairly common, especially in the Empire. But like good Sith, there's only been a handful of Sith, so
Yeah.
the examples of that are very very short, and I can only really think of one person doing it like maybe a couple times.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
won't say who, because that is a huge
Don't.
spoiler for
Yeah.
you.
So, oh boy. Okay. So Luke basically decides to. So Yoda says like, there's there's this forest. There's this like spot that's really filled with the dark side. Luke goes in. He sees Darth Vader and fights him, and they basically decapitates Vader. And then it turns out
Yeah.
it's Luke's face. It's Luke's head. Which, I mean, I guess that's, is that symbolizing his fear that he's going to go down that path?
Yeah, it's pretty much just kind of like a force vision of like, hey, if you rely solely on your strength of arms and weapons, then there may be a chance that you could turn to the dark side, and this is what your fate would be. You would, yeah, it's pretty much just a symbolization of don't
Don't go to
don't
the
go
dark
to the
side.
dark
Yeah.
side, otherwise you'll end up like Vader, a monster.
So is this when, so the, basically, cutting back to Leia and Han, they had to get out of the asteroid because they realized that they were inside, like, the mouth of a giant, I don't know, asteroid space worm. And
Yeah.
they, of course, the Empire is just right there, and shocker, the light speed, they have no light speed. It still doesn't work. So then it's kind of brilliant. They hide
Yeah.
out like on top of the ship where no one can see them.
They charge one of the star destroyers that's pursuing them, and then they charge the bridge, and like right as they get out of view, they land directly behind it, and it is like stuck in their blind spot, and they are completely lose the track of the Millennium Falcon. And I think this is when Vader kills another one of the commanding officers, which gives Nita another battlefield promotion.
So I suppose we skipped a little while before. One of his officers comes over to him and sees the helmet being placed on top of Darth Vader. Which, first of all,
Yeah, I think that was
which
Captain
first of
Nita.
all, so he doesn't. I guess he doesn't. I mean, That's what I thought was weird. Was he asleep before? Does he not wear that when he sleeps? He has to wear something to keep him breathing.
I think he was meditating at that
Oh,
point.
okay.
Yeah.
And it's the first indication we see his like bald, burnt out head. And first of all, I thought you had amazing hair. Like, what a shame. But also, this is like the first indicator we see of Darth, because we know Darth Vader is a man. We know he is a
Yeah.
human being. But this is like the first time we're seeing like his skin, which doesn't sound like that. I know it's supposed to be a kind of a creepy, like, ew, or something's not right with him. We don't know that he was like basically burned up, but it's like the first indicator. It's the first like real like, oh yeah, he's like a human.
Yeah,
He's a person. Like,
when in the first one, Obi-Wan just says like, "Oh, Vader, he's more machine now than man." But I mean, it is kind of cool seeing the man behind the mask, or even for like the back of his head for a brief moment. It's like, oh man, that's gnarly.
but he keeps saying, "I want that ship. I want that ship." Like, keep following them. I know, and I know we know later he wants them because he wants to use Han and Leia and Chewie to draw out
Yeah,
Luke.
he's using them as bait because he knows that he's connected to them on an emotional level.
But I just think it's funny because he keeps saying, "I want that ship," it sounds more like he wants the ship more than them.
Which
I know
they're
that's
a
not the
package
case.
deal.
It makes more sense than list. I know it makes more sense than him listing off all their names, but like, so they're hiding out on the ship, and they decide to go to the Cloud City, or Lando's planet. What is Lando? Like, what is his title there?
He's like, he's on Bespin. He's on like a mining platform. And they mine gas, which is used as fuel. So I guess he's like the foreman of that mining operation, or like the chairman. He is basically like in charge of like Cloud City, which is just like a mining colony for the most part. So I guess, yeah, he's just like a foreman or something. He's someone in charge of all the day-to-day operations there.
And so they decide to go see Lando, and he's struggling kind of with his training, and then we see his plane, his ship sink down to the swamp, and Yoda says, "Well, just lift it up." And he's like, "Oh no, I can't. It's not the same as lifting." Yeah, I love this part because he says like, "It's lifting up rocks is one thing. This is totally different." And Yoda's like, "No different." Just like, this one reason why I love Yoda is because he's so, like I said before, he's very clear cut and straightforward. He's very old. He's seen everything.
He doesn't have time to beat around the bush.
Yeah, exactly. And Luke attempts to lift up the ship. He can't do it. It's too heavy. Yoda does, and then that's, I mean, it's gotta be somewhat of a jab when Luke said like, "I can't believe it," and Yoda says, "That's why you fail." It's like, ooh, accurate, but
burn.
So they reach the Cloud City, and Han is not welcome there, at least right away.
I mean, no, Han's pretty welcome there. Like when he first shows up, like Lando kind of like busts his chops, like, "Oh, you got some nerve to show up here in my ship, you pirate." And then he's just like, "Oh, how you doing, buddy?" Like he's just kind of like joking around with him. It's Leia who is like really like apprehensive there, especially since 3PO wandered off. And I mean, we as the audience see that he gets shot and is like obliterated. He gets blown up. But yeah, it's Leia who is the one who's like really is like, I don't trust Lando. I don't want to be here any longer than I need to be. And Han's all like, yeah, I don't trust him either. I mean, he's my friend after all.
So they arrive, and C-3PO he wanders in somewhere else accidentally, then gets like dismantled.
Yeah, he gets
and
shot.
Chewie goes on the hunt for him. And Leia, she has a change of clothes, and I'm guessing that they supplied that. But later, she's back in her snowsuit, and I'm like, when did you change? Did they make you change? Because that's when the the Empire shows up.
I mean, I'm sure they like threw
And
her like back in a room and it's just like, yeah, she probably just changed there because they just threw her back in a room.
and they decide to go. Lando invites them to dinner, and Darth Vader and Boba Fett are there, and they go in, and I'm like, what? I just kept thinking that that was it, Robot
Oh yeah,
Chicken, the joke of like what that dinner was
yeah.
like.
No, that's probably one of my favorite Robot Chicken sketches. It's just all the stormtroopers are waiters that are just filling them up. They're up with water, and Vader has a bendy straw so he can drink it through like the grill on his mask. And Boba Fett and Han Solo are just flipping each other off.
So you said this in our last episode. He is has all of the bounty hunters
Yeah,
on his ship, and he says to them like he wants Han, and he says to Boba Fett, "No disintegration." And I'm like, oh yeah, because you said like it's implying that he's the one that burnt up Uncle Owen
yeah,
and Aunt Beru.
because I mean it. At that point in Star Wars, we've never seen anyone be disintegrated before. I mean, we see that in the Mandalorian, because Mando like just disintegrates a bunch of Jawas. Um, yeah, classic.
Classic.
Um, but at that point, we know that Boba Fett, who is like the only bounty hunter on Vader's ship that was on Tatooine at the time, and is regularly being employed by the Empire, so it would make sense that he was the one who helped carry out that job. But yeah, it is also cool because we do get to see kind of like a wide variety of different bounty hunters. Like we get to see Boba Fett, classic Boba. We get to see a couple like droids, kind of like battle droids, and a couple crazy looking aliens.
And they but I just like they walk in, and then Han, they decide they're torturing him.
Yeah,
Why even bother? He even says they never even asked me any
yeah,
questions.
they're torturing him because they know that Luke will be able to sense their distress and will come to their help.
Oh my, okay, because
That's the
I
whole
always
reason why
like,
they were even like being pursued in the first place by the Empire.
I know, yeah, but like I was just thinking, I'm like, why even bother torturing him? Because Luke does have he is in training, and then he has like a vision. He sees his friends in pain, and Obi-Wan is saying, "No, you're not ready yet." And this is when we get the line of, "He was our last hope.
Yeah,
No, there is another." And you're like,
yeah,
"Oh,
implying that
there's
yeah,
more than meets
there's
the
another
eye."
Skywalker. It's like, oh, who is it? Yeah, oh,
What?
where? Who? Please tell me. We must know.
So yeah, Luke's on his way, and this is when Lando, he's like, he. I mean, he says he doesn't know what he didn't know. Like, yeah, they just appeared, they showed up. He couldn't really stop them and whatnot, but he had to have known this wasn't going to go well.
He said that he had a line of dialogue saying like, "Oh yeah, like I had made a deal with them that they will leave the station alone and they would take
Just
Luke."
Han and leave
No, like
Leia.
the original plan, according to Lando, was that he wasn't going to keep you guys. He was going to allow Han, Luke, Chewie, and Leia to, or not Luke, Han, Chewie, Leia, and 3PO to stay there on Cloud City, and they would stay there for pretty much the rest of their time, and the Empire would leave, and they would only take Luke. And then later on, Vader completely changed that plan of, oh yeah, we're giving Han to the bounty hunter, Leia and the Wookiee are coming with me, and I'm probably going to leave a detachment of stormtroopers here. And then Lando reveals the classic line of, this deal's getting worse all the time.
Yeah, so he ends up basically admitting, yeah, they only want Luke and whatnot. And Luke arrives, and this is not this, and Leia's like screaming at him, "Don't! It's a trap! It's a trap!" And I just find that funny because that's not even the famous "It's a trap."
No, there's so many traps in Star Wars of people just
Yeah.
yelling, "It's a trap!" And it's Admiral Akbar's, when he says it, it's the meme.
And Luke, we then get into what we've all been waiting for, is the fight with him and Darth Vader. And this, what do you guys think? What do you guys think of the choreography of this fight scene versus the last one?
definitely improved since the one with Alec Guinness Obi-Wan on the Death Star, which was literally just kind of like a very slow-paced, choreographed, just like staging sword fight. I felt like that was just like them practicing their sword fight of like these are the steps we're gonna do, and then later we're gonna do it really fast. Whereas this one is just like they're using the environment, they're changing scenes, we're seeing weathering and damaging on both participants, mainly Luke. It's a very drawn out fight, and they're both kind of treating this like a game of chess of I can't show him all I can do right off the bat, otherwise he's going to be able to block it if I try to do it later on. And Vader is that's pretty much what like Luke's kind of like going and thinking, and Vader's just kind of treating this as like a cat and
Hmm.
mouse game. Because later on, it gets to a point where he doesn't even fight Luke, and he just throws a bunch of shit at him for like a good 3 minutes.
I realized I'm an idiot, and I realized I skipped. I forgot. I know this. I didn't forget the scene. I just realized that it just happened when Han Solo goes through the carbon freezing thing.
Yeah.
And this is when we get the probably the most famous line from Han and Leia when he kisses her and I love you. I know. I've seen so many like it's all over like Pinterest and Etsy of cups and guest towels and
Oh yeah,
any
yeah. I saw like a bunch of like T-shirts and like hats and backpacks at in Disneyland of just I love you, I know, and it's just like the his and her kind of fashion.
yeah. Haley, what are you love Han Solo so much? Does this break your heart? This him being
Yeah,
frozen?
and I think it's kind of like with the whole theme of, I'm going to go a little deep here,
Go
but
for
like
it.
the royalty using the poor for their own gains. It's like, okay, Han is disposed of for Luke and Leia's success for a moment, but still, that's what my issues with it. And as much as I love Leia, like, I don't know. That's my
I mean, I
feelings
don't
on
think
it.
she realizes that. It's more just
Well,
he has a bounty on his head,
Yeah.
and
yeah.
Boba Fett's like money.
But Haley, how do you feel of this was kind of like Harrison Ford's idea of this is how he wants his character to die, and he didn't want to come back for Return of the Jedi. He wanted this to be like the end of Han Solo's
Yeah,
story.
I'm super happy that they didn't go with that because I feel like they owe Han Solo a lot more than that. I mean, you see a lot of character development from A New Hope into Empire Strikes Back and all throughout Empire Strikes Back is, and then also just like the dynamic between him and Luke is really interesting, and then his relationship with Leia is really interesting. He becomes like a core character, like a core crew member, and I don't think that would bring Han Solo justice.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Which kind of makes it kind of even more sad that his character was kind of like I felt like his story could have kept going on in the sequel trilogy, and him just dying
Was that
um,
on him
Yeah.
though? Was that on him?
rather abruptly. Yeah,
Because he's been saying we know there's debate.
I
We
mean,
kind of are unsure exactly why he said though he felt that it was right for the character and he wanted to, he just and I can respect that. I just think I disagree. I don't think it was right for the character, and I don't think it would have done any. It would have just been
yeah,
as messed up as it
I
was.
yeah,
It made more sense later than it would have in the original trilogy.
yeah, no, it did make more sense, but it was just the fact that like Harrison Ford kind of like carried out the he hated he seemed to like kind of like carry around that like he hated this role, and
Yeah,
that he was worried that like this was the only thing he was going to be remembered for, and there are plenty of movies that I remember him more for than Star Wars, like Indiana Jones, Blade Runner, uh, uh, Air Force One as the president.
he's the president in that movie.
And yeah, he was the president. He went up against Gary Oldman, and Gary Oldman was a Russian terrorist.
Ah,
And we get the classic line of "Get off my plane," and just
oh, okay,
punches him.
okay.
That's a good movie. It was definitely part of like the '90s political thriller action kind of thing. It was basically Die Hard on a plane.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's literally what it is. It's Die Hard on a plane.
So, yeah, I think it made sense. It made more sense for the character for they're suddenly down a man. But no, I don't think it would have been appropriate for him to die. At least then, especially then.
At the time of the movie, like they definitely specified as like, oh yeah, he survived carbon freezing. Like they confirmed that in the movie because they were going to do the same process to Luke so they could transfer him to the Emperor without too much of a.
But there was also like there was a line of dialogue. It was supposed to be of him saying, "I know Leia, and wait for me." It's something like saying, "I'll be back," which I like that they didn't because it was a little too wordy. Like it was like I know is better and more simple, especially because the whole movie, she's kind of she doesn't want to just fully admit that she likes him. And then after they kiss, she does kiss him on the cheek, and he kisses her on the forehead at one point. And I kind of love when they see Darth Vader and Boba Fett and Han shooting at him. You can see he's holding Leia's hand, and I always thought that was super cute. And she finally, just when she's really worried that she might lose him, that's when she's able to admit, like, I love you. And it's sad, but it's also like, good for you, sharing your emotions, Leia. That's nice.
But yeah, no, and so yeah, jumping back to the fight with Luke and Vader, I really feel like this was such a good climactic moment of the film because at this point in the movies, we had never really seen these two like directly interact with each other, at least on like this kind of like a personal like hand to hand level, which kind of makes seeing Luke being pushed to such an absolute low during this fight. Like he's just getting boxes and crates thrown at him. He's getting knocked down flights of stairs. He's getting thrown out a window, and he gets his hand cut off and loses his lightsaber in the process. We've never seen him go to this such a low point before, and it's really kind of unique to see moments like this in adventure series where you see like the heroes take such a huge loss, because at the end of this movie they lose. Luke loses his hand, his lightsaber, like a huge and like a valuable weapon. Han gets kidnapped,
but he gets a new one right away. I feel like that's
he
not.
Gets a new one, but I mean, like for the
the
most part, like
for the moment,
yeah, for like the most part, like this movie can be like the Empire wins. Like they gained no ground or like any decisive victories for the rebellion. Like they got pushed off of like their main hideout after being discovered. Han gets kidnapped. They all get tortured. He loses a hand. Like they don't really gain anything tangibly valuable for the rebellion or anything that could help them win like a victory against the Empire, which I feel like is super useful, super like creative for this movie. And I absolutely think that's one of the reasons why this movie is credited as like the best of the Star Wars movies.
What I really love about the scene is, Luke is just like, Vader has him backed into a corner, and he's like, he looks so terrified. He's beaten up. He's shaking. And then, he loses his hand. He starts crawling, like climbing, trying to get away from Darth Vader. And then this is when Darth Vader reveals the biggest spoiler in cinematic history, like, no, I am your father. And I realize I love that. So him screaming, no, that's impossible. And the more that I think about, the more I'm realizing, because he already realizes he has this fear of turning to the dark side, and then to find out that that's exactly what happened to his father. That's exactly the path Anakin took. There is that it's not even just the realization of, oh my God, you're my dad. It's the realization that he is, will I turn to the dark side? Like, it's definitely, I am capable of it, because if my dad could do it, I could do it. It's more, that's when that internal conflict really overwhelms him, and he falls, and then is outside of it, and he's hanging upside down, one hand, no lightsaber, and then Leia, and then she turns around.
Yeah, this is like the first instance where we see Leia is somewhat like adept to the Force. Like she hears his like Force projection of like crying out for help, and she's like, wait, Luke needs our help, and she knows exactly where he is, and that kind of leads into like, oh yeah, this is like her first example of like her knowing how to use the Force.
Going back really quickly to Luke and his internal conflict regarding the dark side. That is my biggest problem with his relationship with Kylo is as somebody that has gone through it themselves and has fought so hard to fight against like I don't know, we call it genetic. It's not genetic, but
Yeah, right.
that is my biggest problem with Kylo. You'd think that he would be more sympathetic towards Kylo and more like if Kylo is displaying Sith like mannerisms, like trying to explain, like, I don't know, just be an uncle and say, hey, no, this isn't our path, like as a family, like don't go down this. And here's how I can help instead of just trying to kill him in his sleep. And I
Yeah.
think that I know now we're talking about not episode 5, but that's one.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
one.
no, like that's gonna open up a whole can of worms for me. We're gonna be here for like another hour if we go into
Once
that.
we get to that movie, Haley, I'll bring you back and
Oh God.
we'll all
Yeah,
rant.
no,
Yeah.
I have
can say something
several
positive
notes
about that movie.
about just that scene specifically.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I
Um,
completely agree
Yeah.
with you that for Luke to have gone through like
what he did.
like the exact same thing that Kylo did, it makes no sense that he doesn't like be sympathetic towards Kylo because like, hey, I know, buddy, I know what you're going through. It's the thing that all Jedi go through.
Yeah.
Here, let me walk you
Yeah.
through it.
Have like a Full House moment.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's tough
Seriously, sit him
growing
down.
up. Yeah. But yeah, so Leia, this is the first indicator that Leia either has the Force, but also would he have been able to call her even if she didn't have the Force?
I mean, yeah, he probably could have, but I mean, it was the fact that Leia was able to hear him so clearly and like knew exactly where he was, showed that she had some control over the Force as well as Luke. And Luke at this point, he doesn't know a lot of like the cool like tips and tricks that a lot of Jedi
Yeah.
do. So like Force projection is a fairly like advanced like Force like ability. So, and I'm pretty sure Yoda didn't teach him that. So for him to be able to do that and for her to be able to hear him shows that she would have to have some kind of knowledge as well, or at least some like genetic skill.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they find Luke and he's so beaten and like just they probably don't even realize like not even just the fight but the emotional roller coaster he just went through. And then Darth Vader is like calls him through the Force, and I always thought it was, and he just immediately says father as opposed to Vader.
Yeah.
Which yes, he is his father, but I don't know. I always just thought that was an interesting like he might not been the person that raised him, but he is his father,
Yeah.
and he does address him that way. And I guess it's really quick. So they were supposed to be Lando's staff supposed to be fixing up the Millennium Falcon, and they still don't have light speed. And he's like, "It's not my fault." And Han was saying the same thing earlier. And that time it wasn't his fault, but this time I love how Chewie's just like, "Oh, screw this," and like pushing him
Yeah.
around, like,
But
it is your
but I mean,
fault.
it is later realized that they did indeed fix the hyperdrive, and
Yes.
the Empire just disabled it. And thankfully, R2 is there, and he repairs it like almost automatically, which leads to them escaping. Vader's pissed, and leads to like this really kind of somber ending of them all kind of hanging out with like the Rebel fleet in the medical bay, of Luke getting his hand back, and Lando and Chewie and the Millennium Falcon tracking down Boba Fett so they can find Han, which leads to a confusing scene of Lando wearing Han's clothes.
They're way cooler.
Yeah, it's just like, why are you wearing his clothes? Like, did you not have enough capes? Did you run out of capes?
Yeah. I thought I would have try Vest for a while. I ditched the capes.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. They did lose. They lost. They haven't, but they have also gained, knowing that Darth Vader is Luke's father. It's terrifying, but it's a piece of information that, for Luke at least, because he realizes ultimately in Return of the Jedi, as much as he wants me to turn to the dark side, he believes he can turn him to the light side.
Yeah.
So it more just turns the tables. And no, it's not quite like them defeating the Death Star. They did in a sense lose, but they have also come a long way and have gained something that can help them.
Yeah, no, I can totally understand that. Yeah.
And that's the end of episode V,
Ep-
aka 5.
Episode V.
And yeah, and I again, like we did last week, I can't really imagine why we'd have to recommend this movie, because I think most people would already have seen
If
it.
you haven't seen this by now, then I'm sure listening to
Why?
us isn't going to change your opinion at any point. You've clearly made your opinion at this point to not watch it. So tune in next week where we will finish up the Ridge Tridge with Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. In the meantime, I'm Kevin Tracy.
I'm Samantha Tomlinson, and thank you so much, Haley, for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, you guys. A lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, see you guys next time, and for those of you still watching, happy Mother's Day.